Hey everyone, welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, independent financial advisor and owner of Elevation Financial. Thanks for joining me today, as always. All right, let's talk about long-term care insurance today. Not a super fun topic, not a topic that's a lot of fun to talk about, but something that is interesting, I think, and something that is important. So I titled this episode "How Long-Term Care Can Wreck Your Financial Plan," and a little bit dramatic, but also pretty accurate. As I work with people on their financial plans, I see a lot of things that can sometimes cause disruptions or kind of wreck the plan overall. And I think that word is intentional. I'm using that word a little bit dramatically, but also intentionally, because there are some very significant, specific things that we can, but sometimes don't plan for, that can make a big difference in how our financial plan turns out, how the forecast looks to us. So this is one of those things that I think is really important to think about. And I want to kind of walk through some of the issues around long-term care today. So first of all, let's talk about what is meant by long-term care. So long-term care involves, could be a variety of services. They're designed to meet a person's health or personal care needs during either a short or long period of time. And those services help people live as independently and safely as possible when they can't kind of take care of themselves or perform those tasks on their own. So we think of long-term care as nursing home care or assisted living or in-home care or some type of care like that, usually later in life as we get to the point in age that we are not able to take care of ourselves as well anymore. So that's what long-term care refers to. So let's talk about some statistics around long-term care. So this is all from the Health and Human Services, Department of Health and Human Services website as of February 2020 are these statistics. They're current as of that date. So a few things to point out. So first off, someone turning age 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care services and support in their remaining years. On average, women need longer or need care longer, about 3.7 years, whereas men on average need care for a shorter period of time, usually 2.2 years. 1/3 of today's 65-year-olds may never need long-term care support, but 20% will need it for longer than 5 years. So there's a kind of a spectrum there. And there's some more statistics, again, directly from the Department of Health and Human Services, current as of beginning of 2020. So a few things to consider here, statistics to consider. One is that for any service, the average number of people that use any service in general is about 3 years, and the percentage of people who use some type of assisted service is 69%. So what that means is the number of people that will need some type of long-term care, whether it's in-home care, assisted living, nursing home, some type of care in general, the number is 69%. And those people on average need it for approximately 3 years. So going a little further, when it comes to at-home care, so unpaid care, the average number of people that will need some type of unpaid care, meaning care from family members, support system, is 59%. Paid care, the average number of people that will need paid care, some type of professional care, is 42%. In facilities, this is a nursing home facility, so some type of assisted living or nursing home facility. 35% of people will need some type of nursing home facilities. 13% will need some type of assisted living. And 37% overall will need some type of facility care overall. And the average in those facilities is approximately 1 year. So these are, again, specific detailed stats, but what usually happens is most people have some mixture. They don't just kind of, a switch doesn't just flip and they immediately go into a nursing home. They might need some sort of in-home care. Then they might need some sort of professional in-home care. Then they might need assisted living. They might need a nursing home. There might be a different kind of chain of events. So on average, that's kind of what happens. So those are some statistics to think about as we talk through this discussion about long-term care. So what this really comes down to is the cost. And the reason I talk about this wrecking your financial plan is the cost of long-term care. So let's talk about some costs on average. This is U.S. national averages. So the average cost of in-home care annually is approximately $53,000 a year. The average cost of assisted living, approximately $51,000. And the average cost of a nursing home, this is a semi-private room, is $105,000 on average. These are just round numbers. So, and that's of this year, and that is based on U.S. national averages. Some states will have higher and or lower rates for those types of services. For example, on the East Coast, you see a lot of nursing home averages being more in the 120, 130 annually ranges. And then other parts of the country might be a little bit less. This is a national average overall. So it is very state by state specific. So these costs are, a lot of people don't think about how much it does cost to, be in a nursing home or have assisted living. It's very expensive. And it can seriously disrupt your financial plan, or in my dramatic case terminology, you can wreck it. And what I mean by that is, so I do a lot of financial plans for my clients, and there's different ways of looking at the data. So looking at the forecast, you can what a lot of people do when they do a planning scenario is they just say, well, okay, I'm going to dump a certain amount of money into my retirement plans. I'm going to compound it by, 7 or 8% or whatever they choose by X number of years. And I'm going to end up with, X dollars at the end, $1 million or whatever. And at that point, they just kind of say, okay, well, I'll take 4% off of it as income and I'm good to go. They kind of do just a really rough kind of math based on those very simple scenarios. It's a good starting point, but what they don't account for in that simple kind of napkin math is, healthcare costs, other costs, and long-term care costs. And if you look at the projections that I typically do with my clients in modeling software, is you look at kind of the long-term cash flow, the income, kind of how the money works out over time. At the very end, what often just kind of disrupts everything is that the last 2 or 3 years of the plan, if we have accounted correctly for long-term care, it can really show this dramatic, kind of plummeting of resources if we haven't planned accordingly. So I often like to show people, hey, yeah, let's do your simple napkin math and let's kind of show the projection, which you haven't accounted for other stuff like long-term care. Now let's put it into a model that does account for long-term care costs at age 87, 88, 89, 90, et cetera. And let's look how much cash flow that drains from what you were expecting. So that's what I mean when I say it can seriously wreck your financial plan. Not to be negative, but it's meant to be eye-opening and meant to be informative so that we can plan for these things. So let's talk about some of the scenarios that are uncovered when we do this. So one common scenario is that, let's say you've got a married couple. One spouse will go into a nursing home. That spouse will drain the assets of the couple before passing away, leaving the surviving spouse with nothing. That's a scenario that happens a lot. And we don't want to think about this, but it can happen. And that can cause great difficulty for the surviving spouse. Another scenario, all assets are, let's say you're single, you're unmarried, all your assets are drained. You go on Medicaid at that point. Medicaid, may kick in to take care of the nursing home costs. And then you're not able to leave any assets behind to family members. Maybe you were planning on leaving some assets behind to children, to family members. Then you're left with nothing. You're dying with zero assets. So while Medicaid can be a support system, it may disrupt your ability to leave a legacy or to leave behind assets to family members. So these are some scenarios that most of us just don't want to think through, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s. No one in their 20s or 30s really thinks about, oh, what if I'm in a nursing home, way down the road. If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe it's a little closer to home. Maybe there's a point where you're thinking, okay, this is not as far off as when I was in my 20s and I need to think about this. So how do we plan for this? Well, to put it simply, when I'm working on a financial plan with a client, or if you're planning yourself, you want to forecast based on long-term care needs. So this is a very personal situation or a personal, decision for you. There's a spectrum. I've had some clients say, you know what, I want to be able to plan for the worst case scenario. I'm going to plan for the cost of a nursing home for, let's say, 3 years to kind of cover the potential worst case scenario ish. And I'm going to plan based on that. And if I don't need nursing home care, if I remain healthy throughout my life, which we all hope for, then no one's really mad about having extra money, and it kind of works out. Others on the other end of the spectrum say, you know what, I'm not going to plan for any of it. I'm just going to kind of, ride my motorcycle off a cliff and go out in a blaze of glory. And that's my plan. That's something they plan on, and they're quite serious about it. And that's a personal choice. A lot of us are in between. A lot of us are kind of saying, well, I don't know that I want to necessarily plan for the worst case scenario, because that can be very expensive and there's a lot of saving involved. But maybe I want to plan for some level of care to kind of statistically improve my odds of being able to support myself later in life. There's also long-term care insurance to consider. So long-term care insurance is basically insurance for the cost of a nursing home if you require it. So the problem with long-term care is it used to be more attainable and more accessible. It's gotten very expensive. The number of carriers that offer it is dwindling, and it can sometimes be very difficult to obtain or obtain affordably. So that is something that is not as viable anymore, and going forward, it may become even less and less viable. But it is an option, especially if you are currently, around age 60, kind of at that zone where you want to think about it. Then long-term care insurance may still be viable if you've been healthy your whole life and don't have a lot of medical issues that can cause cost increases. That can be an option. Also, you want to consider your family situation. Let's say you have a very strong family support system. You have lots of kids who you feel are willing and able to provide care if you need it. You have a support system around you where if you do need some sort of in-home care, that support is available to you. So that's something to consider as well. If your support system is not as strong and you have fewer family members that live nearby, maybe no one lives nearby, that's going to be a consideration as well. So you want to think about what your family situation is like and what it may look like in the future. So this is all not meant to, be depressing or to kind of ruin your day or anything. It's more meant to open our eyes collectively to what can happen in the future from a cost standpoint, what long-term care looks like and how it can disrupt or cause issues in your financial plan if not accounted for. So my goal is that we're intentional about it. So whatever your expectation is, your forecast, your desires are, where you are on the spectrum of your expectation for long-term care, is that you are intentional about it and that we think about it and make intentional decisions as opposed to just letting this sort of thing happen to us. Because if it does happen to us, it's too late at that point if we haven't planned for it. So again, my goal is think about this. So as you're doing financial planning, if you're working with a professional or not, however you're doing your planning, it's good to think about long-term care, run the numbers, look at statistics, decide kind of where you fall on that spectrum, and make a decision intentionally based on what your plan is and what your desire is for the future and how your financial plan and your forecast looks when weighed against those costs and potential costs of long-term care. So personally, I always, as a starting point, I start with let's plan for the cost of nursing home, national average, and let's plan for 3 years. To me, that's kind of the most logical worst case scenario to plan for. And then we can always back down from that if we feel like there's a reason to. But I generally start with that as the starting point when thinking about long-term care. So with that, I hope it's given you some food for thought when it comes to accounting for costs in the future, specific to long-term care. And as always, if you have questions about this, you can always reach out and find me on my website. That is elevationfinancial.com, as you probably know. And again, I'm always happy to answer questions. So if you have any questions, reach out, elevationfinancial.com. I'm happy to chat about this or other things. You can book a complimentary money session on my website as well, and I'll be happy to chat. So with that, have a great day. Thanks for joining me, and see you next time.